I am Pops, and yes, Succession is one of those award-winning shows that I hadn't seen, but it dropped on physical media. I got a copy. I want to talk about it a little bit. The link's in the description so you can buy a copy for yourself. Let's talk about what's good, what I like, what I don't like. Let's get to it now. So the show centers around Logan Roy, who's kind of a stand-in for Rupert Murdoch, as the show is commentary of being anti-Fox News because it's this big global media giant. It's corrupt. It's about anti-capitalism. It's about all this political backplaying and backbiting. Who's going to take over when he retires? And right out of season one, within a few episodes, he has a stroke. And everything is in question about who's going to take over the company. And it's falling apart rapidly because the heir apparent, his eldest son, well, I'm sorry, not his eldest son. That's kind of a joke in season four. Kendall, the one son, is a complete buffoon at making some of these deals, and he's allowed a backdoor situation to come in and put the company at even more risk, which sets up even more plays over the course of the four seasons. All right, this is the aforementioned Kendall Roy. A lot of the show is really about him or the impacts of things that he's actually doing. Season one kind of derails because he can't really get the deals done. His addiction, his cocaine use is overtaking even his judgment. And by the end of season one, things get turned on its head when it turns tragic. And then, of course, in season two, he becomes a completely different character, a sad sack of a human strung out on drugs. And then, of course, there's a big twist at the end of season three. And we'll get to some more deeper spoilers later on in this video. And then, of course, in season four, he's really the ones kind of pulling the reins and basically pretending that everyone should ignore a lot of the actions in the past and trust him with leadership and judgments and decisions moving forward. I find nothing about Kendall particularly interesting and redeeming, but at the same time, I get how he's used as sort of like this not really protagonist antagonist, like this hybrid character anti-hero in this corporate drama. It kind of works for what they're going for. All right, Kieran Culkin's Roman Roy is by far my favorite character, probably the fan favorite because he's obviously comic relief. He's extremely awkward and nerdy most of the time. And it's not until really the end of season three and into season four that you really kind of see his business acumen kind of take place. In fact, at one point, they ship him away to like a business management training weekend. And of course, that's hijacked by some random incident of the moment. But he is the most interesting. They have weird, quirky things that deal with his sexual abilities and his relationships and dynamics like that to make him more of like this perverse man that you wouldn't really want to like. But at the same time, I don't feel like he's ever backbiting enough that we don't cheer for him at least a little bit. Definitely more than some of the other characters in the show. All right, then that takes us to Shiv. Shiv is the sister, right? Siobhan is the one player who comes from politics, and her left leaning, Bernie Sanders supporting political career is kind of like put on the shelf to kind of come in and be a player in the Roy universe and who's going to take over. And of course, it's hijacked even more so at one point when Logan kind of points that she will be the heir apparent and kind of toys with the audience as much as he's toying with the character. Like, I really think this was the part of the show where it sort of kind of falls apart. I thought the calling her heir apparent and then having us see her degrade enough that she clearly can't be the choice, even though that commitment is still there, was going to be kind of like the theme of the show. And then at the end, she would kind of come into her own. It would surprise everyone that that was the deal all along. Okay, that story arc did not happen and was derailed very early on and just made things, I don't want to say more complicated than they needed to be, but I was losing some interest because I felt like then we ended up on sort of like the routine, repetitive nature of things, story arcs that don't go anywhere. They have deals that get sabotaged just because it become less interesting. But that's her. She is the other really, really main character that we need to kind of keep our finger on. There are a ton of other characters that are significant. This is Shiv's boyfriend, ultimately husband. He is sort of like this beta spouse that the family treats like crap, and he therefore treats cousin Greg, another sort of insignificant beta male, like crap. It is a story arc that really was kind of distracting, especially cousin Greg's at time, because it doesn't really change that much over the show. But at the end in season four, things are kind of rushed into place and what will be the verdict and the outcome for Tom and Greg and other characters. So I don't dislike Tom as kind of as much as I had in my initial reactions. Kind of my thoughts on him kind of go up and down like this. I don't really care for how the show handles things when it comes to some of these characters and whatever story arcs there are. And that kind of takes me back to full circle to where I am on the show, because the show has won a ton of awards, nominations as best drama, writing, direction, acting, all everything you can think of. It has at least been nominated and won several times. I can't believe this show has garnered that type of accolades, because I find this show to be extremely unwatchable. I don't think that I hated the experience. I didn't. I get why it's popular. It's well executed in a lot of ways, but there's no one really you're rooting for. Like, everyone is a villain. Everyone is an awful person. This is so much social commentary of being anti-Fox media. Their finger is on their nose, like wink, wink, nod, nod. Look and see what we did there. That it becomes sort of distracting, because they even like try to paint this sort of like New York Times competitor that they're trying to acquire at one point, but then it all falls through. But then they're back on the table later. And I'm like, well, okay, but they're insignificant, just like they're insignificant in the real world. And in the real world, all of these corporations are just as corrupt as this one that you're beating over the head. The other thing that was really frustrating was in season one, there's this big cover up that's revealed because Tom is put in charge of cruises. There's been this huge, long standing history of corruption and sexual harassment, even murder, that Logan and many others had covered up and buried. Now it's all going to come to light. And that's sort of held over the family's head the entire show, because that's the only way they can have a political line to the president, DOJ, and the future president. So it was so tedious and ridiculous, because at some point those things would either manifest or they don't manifest, and have any congressional hearing or not. Okay, whatever. And it was just used as a ploy, I think, in season two, where they flip it and then Kendall betrays everyone. He has a big speech and it shocks everyone what his revelations are. He kind of turns it all over like he has all of these evidence and whatever. And he's kind of been in cahoots behind the scenes. Okay, fine. But then it becomes like a wet fart, because in season 3 and 4, it becomes, well, we really don't have as much evidence. Oh, it really doesn't work. It really is kind of like real life. Like, they don't really have the goods on these people. It's always exaggerated. It's created from our press and pushback. And really, at the end of the day, the amount of corruption and wealth and abuse and narcissism and how they lead their lives is really more off-putting. It's sort of like a TMZ meets Arrested Development. It tries to be Arrested Development at moments where they have some levity and some fun, especially around Greg's character, a little bit with Tom and Roman. But at the end of the day, it's more like TMZ shock factor. Look at what these rich people do. Look at what we call it. Look at this story. Look at who's cheating on who. It's just like Shiv's having another affair. Kendall's high on coke, and look at the crazy things he's and Kendall's character. Oh dear Lord, there's points where Kendall's character is sounding like White from Dodgeball, where he'll say something and be like, "Yeah, man, oh, just kidding," or not, or I am, or I'm not. Like, it's just, it kept happening, especially when he's trying to build this social media team and all, he's treating them like dog crap and all that. And they're throwing around these numbers about how rich they are. They get whisked away to different weddings and different events at these castles and great resorts and all that. It's like, it's so removed from our reality. That's probably one of the positives. It at least shines the light on how all these people actually lead and what kind of things that they experience that are so out of touch with us and how they have nothing in common with us. I like all that. But when it tries to get more hard nosed and commentary, it kind of lost me a lot, because I just feel a lot of that was a lot more of them talking over there's like way out more than their own knowledge. They're disconnected from what actually is going on in the real world. One of the other misses for me was Alexander Skarsgård as this tech giant. So he has this huge up and coming. He's sort of this hybrid of like Elon or maybe the founder of Spotify and others. And he's like this, he calls himself a genius, and he's so stoic and disconnected. And I don't know. I'm sure some of the techie guys are kind of like this. Fine. I hated all of this. It just felt like tedious for the sake of tedious sake. I don't feel like it was ever going to go anywhere, and it runs right up until the final season. It was one of the worst elements. That's why season 3 falls off, and season 4 even more so for me, because I just had kind of lost interest in this piece of it all. Like, at this point, I don't care. I don't care who buys whom and whatever, and his play and all this. And he was instructed to basically be this more stoic character and less interesting character. So I just didn't enjoy that part at all. And that brings me to Greg. So Greg is the most frustrating of the characters, because he's this sweet guy trying to be, he's like the lovable loser, right? Sucked up into this universe. And there's times where he's like, "Oh man, you guys are terrible. You're awful, whatever." And then the slippery slope becomes when he's obviously given documents that he was supposed to shred to Kendall. And that leads a little bit to the finale of season 2 and into season 3. But then they don't know what to do after this. Like, part of season 3 and 4 is, well, Greg's with this attorney and that attorney. He's with the family, not with the family. They lost the script on what to do with Greg. And the problem is Greg is like the nice guy caught up in the pool of sharks, right? And it would have been easier to kind of figure out how to keep him as the nice guy and doing the right thing. I actually wish he had other documents, or he had a way to have stuff on everyone, and always a way to kind of protect himself in a manner. And I would like to have seen his growth of being less of a stutterer. Not that he has to be a ladies' man, but they had this like rabbit hole of being down the dating ladder, and he become, oh, I dated this hot chick, which means I can date this hot chick, which it was like, we didn't want to see that about Greg. We wanted to see him actually being the nice guy. Not, I can't see this hot chick until I break it off with that hot chick. I mean, that would have been more down the Greg that we liked. And instead they put mud on him as well. And I really didn't care for that at all. The biggest spoiler of all is, of course, how the show actually ends with all the backbiting and all of shenanigans. Somehow everything aligns and Tom is in charge. And it was awful. I hated it so much. I get it. They think they're making fun of Fox. They think they're making fun of the family hierarchy and all that. But what they're really doing is sort of like elevating Tom as the guy who knew how to play the game all along and kind of keep elevating himself. It actually is kind of like almost like a corrupt crony capitalism message rather than something anti-corporate. Like, it just, you're actually promoting the wrong thing. Like, it just really wouldn't make sense. I really didn't like any of that. And he picks people like the person next to him, Jerry, to join along with it because she's been relatively competent and relatively safe through most of the show and was a valid point to move forward with whatever this company would look like. But that said, I don't know if any of you watched the show and you were happy about this decision. I thought it was retarded. The only thing that would have made sense for me was near that end, you had a way to navigate it so it would have really been Roman having goods with Greg and having the documents and getting leverage. And it just seemed like it was going to work itself out. So Roman was going to get his act together. He would be the one. I did like that Kendall kind of has to just walk off alone. Like, we have no idea what his future is. But Shiv is reduced to like the anti, like, I thought that the whole point of the show was all this feminism stuff, pro woman, strong woman, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, it's like, well, she's finally pregnant. She's just going to be Tom's wife. Like, she doesn't really have a seat at the table, really. And I'm like, wow, that was a message. So I don't know what the show is. The show going for that? Is the show going for a message that's kind of like that? And I'm just out of alignment because it's sort of out of tone with where we started with season 1 and 2 in particular. Then it completely starts to get real muddled in season 3. And then we get into like really heavy political stuff in season 4. So in season 4, that political stuff gets so absurd. And this Jared Merkin character, he's like literally called fascist. It's literally like this weird stereotype of this extreme right-wing Trumpian, all this sort of stuff. And it's like the guy you're supposed to hate, but you really don't know anything about it. They just talk about things sort of like very cursory, and the show gets very on the nose with these sort of like platitudes pulled right from the real world. And I thought all of at this point, I'm just waiting for the show to be over. I think it's all dumb. I'm not enjoying any of it. And I think that this was where the show just completely lost its light. It just got too much into the weeds with the real life and not trying to stay a little higher brow than that, or at least showing things more at odds with one another. The scene where they like had their secret dinner and they're all like picking the president, and then how that stuff falls out after that. I think all of that was like pulling the curtain back a little bit on how these corporations operate. That was all fine, but being so on the nose with all of this, and then there was also the thing about what Tom made the decision to how to call the election. Well, obviously, whether that be 2000 or whether one of the other elections, you feel like that's all very on the nose. I don't know. I think that the show did better by like pulling the curtain back on things, but it got a lot of tunnel vision. And I say I get why the show is great and good and gets a lot of awards, but I also have no desire to rewatch the show. Like, it's just like, okay, I did it. It's a one and done for me because I don't have really anyone to cheer for. And I know how it ends now. And there's no one that I like that really comes out on top. Speaking of not coming out on top, not that I like or whatever, I have no idea why Alan Ruck's character is in this show. He completely is just like this distraction. They try to play some of it as being like the quirky older brother, and it's played for laughs because it's just like one point he's like the weird old guy, doesn't want to be part of the company, and he lives on a ranch, and it's all about all sorts of like hippy dippy type stuff. And then it's like, oh no, he's not hippy dippy. He's like uber conservative. And then he has this like tit for tat thing with the Bernie Sanders surrogate, which is Gil, this character that Shiv worked for, and he feels like he won the argument. The guy was like trying to get out of the conversation, and suddenly that takes us down the rabbit hole where Connor is now going to run for president. And he has this basically prostitute for a partner because he basically just pays for her to have this quote playwright career. All of this could be deleted from the show. I'm assuming they're poking the knife at someone. They're having jabs and laughs at someone. I thought it was a waste of time. And poor Alan Rook, he's just allowed to just show up and do these scenes. I don't think there's anything particularly good or interesting about any of it. He was never really relevant. Making him relevant would have been stupid because they spent so much time explaining what a boobie is and showing how what a boobie is. I hated all of that. Things I did like, I really liked Carl. I really liked Frank. Jerry. These three were really kind of like the backbone of the show with the corporate thing. Like, how do these corporations survive all of this incompetence and backbiting and corruption? You feel like these are the three that represent the pillars at all of these companies. And I would have liked to have seen a lot more of them figuring out how they're navigating in this circle. Because there's pieces with like, yes, Frank and Kendall, Jerry and Roman, which was weird. And then they make fun of Carl and they make fun of everyone, but they are really the backbone of what makes all of this work. I don't really have a negative view of any of them. I don't really have kind of a positive, but I just lean positive because everyone else is so negative. Now, the star of the show for me in a lot of ways was Marsha Roy. She's my favorite character in a lot of ways because she is sort of like a stalwart for doing well in this universe. Yes, she's got her rich husband, and then anytime, it's like twice he has cast her aside for some sort of slut of the week, and he has some sort of affair. Like, they bring in Holly Hunter's character for a minute and they play that out, and I thought it was awful. I thought Holly Hunter's character was just so cringe. I was waiting for like a double agent twist or a triple agent twist, and instead it was just, no, she's sleeping with the boss, and I'm like, this is awful. So she was constantly being put out the pasture for that. And then, of course, he has to bring her back in and walk the walk of shame and, look like he's a good husband again. And then it happens again. And she just, like, at one point, she kind of has to cut a deal to better her situation. I wish there was a little more about her also trying to use that leverage to fight for her actual biological son, because it happens early in the first couple seasons. And then it's just, maybe there's a name drop, but nothing really comes of it later on. I would have liked to have seen her being more of, I don't know, a reasonable voice in the storm to the children and all the chaos. Like, she could have always been right. Like, I wish I would have seen a way to elevate the show, was that even though she's an unofficial matriarch in all of this, like, no one cares. She's not really in the business. She's not really at the building. Her advice would have always been right, would have been like the best theme of the show to give it some rewatchability. You could go back and go, oh, when she had this conversation with Kendall, Roman, Shiv, or even Logan, you can see, oh, I don't, she could have been like, oh, I don't know that you should trust that person. I got a bad vibe when I hear about that. Like, what about this? That doesn't make sense. Why would this happen? Or wait, where was Greg during Thanksgiving? Or what was going on with, it would have been so much better, I think, to have this foundational thread, because she's really a character that has, I want to say, the least amount of mud on her, because I feel like she never went to the pig trough the way everybody else does. So it makes sense that she does. But she also seems like the one that could have been a better voice of reason in the middle of all this. All right, I think that's pretty much my take on Succession season 1 through 4 or in the books. I'm not sure I have any desire to watch them again. Do you enjoy the show? Did you have favorites, not favorites? Did I miss someone that you wanted to talk about? I would have hours and hours to get into some of these random scattered characters that would come and go and that kind of thing. At the end of the day, I just don't feel like I'd ever watch the show again. I get why it was good, but I think like other shows like Breaking Bad are so much better than the show. If it ever lost to Breaking Bad, I'm totally confused. I went and made note of like certain episodes that they won they won Emmy Awards, and they would have these episodes they submitted as being the representation of their talent. And in those episodes, I was very meh on a lot of that. Like, I think it was fine. I think every episode was fine. I don't think there was any episode where I felt like anything was really badly acted or edited or performed or anything like that. There's a lot of shaky cam stuff that they use, a lot of handheld cam, I thought was a little weird because sometimes it doesn't thread together quite right. There's a lot of time jumps in the show that aren't really well spelled out, and they just do. And I'm like, that was a little weird. But that may be because I'm binge watching it, not necessarily because it would have happened in real time. So overall, though, I get why the show is acclaimed. I just don't think it's something for me. I only watched a couple seasons of House of Cards. Maybe I have to go back and watch that and kind of feel out kind of how it makes a mad twist. Because I know they completely derailed the show with the Kevin Spacey stuff. And I bailed out just before that had happened. I've never watched Veep. This is also usually the same conversation with a show like Veep. But I think the only thing the show does really, really well for me is it shines a light on all of this corruption and the elitism, the gap between us and them. One of my biggest things I'll say is these people have a lot more common with their enemy than they do us. In other words, if we took the rich guy that Logan likes and the rich guy that Logan hates, they all have more in common with Logan than any of them do with you or me. And that reflects real life tremendously. So love your thoughts on this very much. Make sure you check out that link in the description to go get your physical copy of this. Thanks for watching, everybody. I am Pops.